What's up, guys? So I got some Doom in the background for you. It's episode 1, my favorite episode, ultra violence difficulty, and I think you're gonna find a lot of interesting thing about this video. You'll probably learn a thing or two. Before I start my blueprints, I want to ask you guys, what is a good idea of a video game? It's a tough question to answer, even for myself. I generally try to look back at some of my favorite games and I ask myself, why is this game so amazing? I have to have some reasons why I adore this specific game so much. I usually try to think, and when then I realize I like Doom because I love the idea of being able to shoot groups of monsters and feel rewarded when I kill them all. But not only that, the weapons, the way the monsters get killed, the tension of being outnumbered makes me feel like I'm unstoppable, or a super soldier, basically. And that is, to me, what makes Doom a great game, because of that philosophy it has. I believe having good ideas to any medium is really all subjective, but you gotta have a good reason of why you say this medium is astounding. Sorrow's not my first attempt at making games. I've made a lot of custom maps for Warcraft 3 back when I was a huge WC3 addict, and I was really into the modding community. I've made many maps, and I also helped some of them for my friend. He was always the mapper. He would lay out the map for me and design the world and all that stuff. I've always been the lead designer or the planner. I would just constantly think of the units, the enemies, the theme, etc. And yeah, both of my friends and we were pretty much the testers too. We would take turns working on our stuff and just test them all day. So here are my blueprints for Sorrow, which is a book I've written a while ago. And if you guys know me, this is simply a first-person shooter in a book, but it's a game at its heart. However, it's also, it has a lot of stuff that I feel like modern game designers need to adapt. It's pretty much an anti-modern shooter, and it's not like an old school shooter too, like Doom or Quake. But you gotta watch the video if you want to know more about Sorrow. Keep in mind, I did some stuff to make it both book and game friendly, so yeah, it is kind of a weird mix because playing a game is not the same compared to reading a book. One thing you should notice is you realize a lot of the missions are placed in cities. Why do I use cities? Well, the beautiful thing about cities is it gives artists and level designers a lot of freedom and a lot of creativity through their mind, especially in the cyberpunk setting. So many possibilities, so many different layouts you can map out. Imagine being able to play levels with beautiful environments and complexity at the same time. That's like my dream level right there. Unfortunately, I pretty much wrote it in the quick route because if the main protagonists explore the city, it's pretty pointless for the reader. It'll make it more slow paced, but for a gamer that is a must, period. This would make Sorrow not one of those games that adapt the same level design philosophy that you are seeing right now in modern shooters. When you read Sorrow, you notice how action-packed it is. Some events may feel like you might be watching a cutscene if it was in the game, but that's not the case. If I want you to take out 20 guys, I want you to do it. I'm not gonna let the game do it for you, because first-person shooters, to me at least, is all about the shooting part. And if I can't shoot the guy, I'm not playing a game then. I'd rather watch an action movie. I made them feel like cutscenes to make it more interesting for the reader to read, and to know that the protagonist, she's, a powerful soldier. She's very skilled, she's deadly, kind of like Doom guy. Like, he can fight like, millions of monsters by himself. He doesn't really need help. She's kind of like him, kind of like a spiritual successor, if that makes any sense. That's one thing that, modern shooters need to stop doing, and that is overusing cutscenes. It's a game, make it into a game. It's okay to have them, but leave them for the very beginning / ending of the mission, or just make them quick and short. There is never a moment where the protagonist is forced to do something where she loses her controls. What this means in gaming language is there are no set pieces. You'll never have to drive a tank, ride a vehicle, and do rail shooting, getting on a turret, etc. You're just going from point A to point B, and you're just shooting stuff with your gun, aka FPS gameplay. I have nothing wrong with these ideas. They're fine if they're implemented properly, but at times it's not the traditional FPS gameplay that people play for. And at least for me, I don't feel like anyone wants to play, an FPS game where you have to drive in a vehicle 90% of the mission and then you can get out and shoot. That's just a terrible mission idea. I think developers need to put more confidence in themselves. I mean, look at Medal of Honor Warfighter. It's like Battlefield 3.5. It's just like another military shooter. And there are so many first-person shooters, that are just too similar to each other. You got the short campaign, the heavy multiplayer focus, the realism, like all this stuff, to me, just don't appeal to me. I want something that's kind of a breath of fresh air. I mean, if you look at Doom and Quake, they both play similarly, but they're not really the same. You can look at the pictures or gameplay of them, and you should notice something, that they do have some differences, even though they are very identical because it's made by the same developer. My idea with Sorrow is not to only show you how to make a great FPS game with modern and old school elements, but I also want to pay respect to old school FPS games because I really think they deserved it. I like, complicated levels and the over the toply fun gameplay, lengthy campaign, and memorable moments. It's not because the good old school FPSs are, better than the modern FPSs. It's just these are great ideas and they should be included in modern shooters in a methodical way. Sorrow is a cyberpunk medium. I am starting to notice the gaming industry are starting to adapt the setting, but I believe I can give you a better cyberpunk experience, mainly because I am a cyberpunk fan. Sorrow stays true to the quote-unquote high-tech and low-life ideology and even some of the beliefs of what makes a medium cyberpunk. Another thing I want to do is make Sorrow specifically designed for the 360. Now, I won't lie, the Xbox 360 is my favorite platform of this generation, but I'm not a fanboy. The main reason I'm doing this is to bring some variety to the 360 because the 360 is mostly Halo and Gears of War most of the time, so I just want to bring something different. And yes, it is another shooter, but there's no such thing as shooter fatigue in my book. I am familiar with the hardware of the console too, and I know it's old and dated, but I know it's still got some juice left to make some great games. The final thing I want to talk about is story. Story has never really been a strong part for first-person shooters. Every time people want a story in a game, the RPG games seem to be the genre that attracts people in that part. For Sorrow, if it was a game, I feel like it needs to be gameplay over story. When I was watching Darkness 2 gameplay, I just felt like I was watching a movie because it was so story-driven and focused, and it wasn't so much, focused on the game. And when I buy a shooter, I want to shoot stuff, which basically means I want to play a game. And I mentioned that, a few minutes ago. And watching Darkness 2, it really feels like more of a movie than a video game to me. However, when I was making Sorrow, I wanted to have a good story, but also be very frantic with its shooting department. That's one of the main reasons why I love Halo so much, because it tries to give you a lot of the enemies for you to shoot, but it also tries to tell a story at the same time. It was a painful experience for me to balance between the heavy shooting and the story progression. What I did was I generally progressed the story from the beginning or the end of every mission. The prologue is pretty much all cutscene if it was a game, but once you reach to the part where the protagonist is on her first mission, it's all your interactivity. The story stops. This is where you, the gamer, can enjoy the game for what it is, and once the mission is complete, the story continues. I didn't add this in my book, but I always want Sorrow to be rather philosophical because I'm a huge fan of Ghost in the Shell. I've always liked the philosophy in the movie, and I do want, Sorrow to have some of this, but I decided to take it out for whatever reasons. I can't really remember it. There are some philosophical moments in the story, but it's not that much. It's not to the level where I want it to be. In the game, I think I can use this as loading screens, but this is basically the protagonist is speaking to the audience to let them know the protagonist more personally. It's a great idea because sorry, I kind of choked what I was trying to say. Anyways, it's a great idea because my protagonist, she's smart and intelligent. It also breaks the one-man army or the silent protagonist that pretty much most FPS games are known for. Even though my protagonist isn't too much different, but at least there are some changes to keep it rather interesting or fresh. So there you go. That's my blueprint of making Sorrow. I consider Sorrow to be like a a FPS game that respects old school FPS games, but it's a modern game at its heart, and it takes risks, so it can be a little different and a little interesting at the same time. It's not like a retelling of Halo or Doom in futuristic settings, even though both Halo and Doom, they're pretty much the main influences for Sorrow, but you have to understand when you're making a medium in a certain genre, it's gonna have some similarities, but the thing is you gotta decide what to keep and what to change to keep it different and unique. At least I can say it won't be like another military shooter or a military shooter disguised in a futuristic setting. Anyways, that's pretty much it for the video, and I will see you guys later.